Let's talk about Scream 7. Saw it last night on opening night during the 7:30 showing, and I had really high hopes for this movie. I was looking forward to it. You know, my daughter had been sick for the past 2 weeks with the flu. She got better just in time to go to see Scream 7 on opening night. This Scream film is almost completely different from all the others. There is an extended intro kill. You know, most of the kills happen within the first couple minutes of the Scream movies. This one, I think, went on for, I'd say, a good 10 minutes before, something actually happened. The layout of the film is not like the other Scream movies. It also seems like pretty much everyone was killed all at once, rather than kind of spread out, which was kind of, It didn't really enhance the excitement or the suspense. There was very, very little character development. And by very little, I mean almost none. This was by far the worst movie in the Scream franchise. The only thing it had going for it was the gore. This was by far the goriest of the Scream films. And I'm almost wondering if the creators thought that the addition of gore would kind of cover up the lack of character development, lack of story, and whatnot. If you watch all the Scream movies, you know how closely they follow the Halloween franchise. Scream is like the little brother of Halloween. In fact, it's referenced quite a bit in the original. In Scream 6, we were led to believe that there's a cult of Ghostface, especially in the trailers and releases leading up to the release of the movie and everything. That wasn't exactly the case, but I mean, it kind of was. There were copycats, and then there were 3 killers, technically, I guess 4. If you count the 2 at the beginning. And that kind of connects to Halloween, the Curse of Michael Myers, There was a cult of Thorn in the Curse of Michael Myers, which played a big part in the movie. In Scream 2, it was revealed that the killer was Nancy Loomis, Billy's mom. Well, in Halloween 2, it was revealed that Laurie Strode was Michael's sister. And in Scream 3, there's this whole Hollywood type thing. I know Halloween 3 was completely different, so there wasn't really much of a connection there. Scream 4 came along and kind of rebooted and had to do with lineage and everything, similar to Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. And then Scream 5 came along, and you had a whole new lead cast. And that didn't really follow in line with Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, because that was more of a continuation of Halloween 4. But then Halloween 6 came along, and there were some quite obvious similarities there between Scream 6 and Halloween, the Curse of Michael Myers. Now for Scream 7. There are some very clear references to Halloween H2O. And I would also go as far as to say a clear reference to Halloween Resurrection. Because in Halloween Resurrection, Busta Rhymes' character sets fire to, I believe it was just the garage of the Myers house, but I think ultimately the Myers house caught on fire as well. And spoilers ahead, so if you don't want spoilers, go ahead and leave this for now. Go watch the movie and then come back. In Scream 7, the Mocker house is set ablaze and burned down. So there is that parallel there. But then in Halloween H2, you had Laurie as a school head of a private school. She's changed her identity. The only person she's told her story to was her son. In Scream 7, Sydney has moved to another town. She's kind of embraced her identity as the final girl. She owns a coffee shop. Her husband is chief of police. But yet the only person who she hasn't really talked to about her past is her daughter. So there is that parallel where Laurie Strode told her son everything, and Sydney refused to tell her daughter everything. I will say there is more than one killer in this, so be on the lookout for that. The death of the first killer was, I would say, it's pretty awesome, and it's kind of a red herring, so to speak. It leads to, there are 3 killers in the movie that we know of. But the death of the first killer, it was somebody that no one knew in previous movies, it's always somebody you know. This was nobody that anybody knew. In fact, Gail Weathers plows over him in her car. She comes out of nowhere, essentially. And she removes his mask live on camera. And they're like, who the fuck is that? It does lead to the other killers. In fact, there is this whole ordeal around Stu Macher, whether he's alive or not, because there are videos, video calls and everything of Stu Macher talking to Sydney. And they do wonder if it's AI or not. And there is this whole thing where his autopsy report is missing, and the coroner at the time is dead, and all this. So there's no real evidence for Stu's death, which does kind of lead a is he, isn't he type thing. And it's still left ambiguous by the end of the movie of whether or not Stu is alive or dead. There are some pretty creative kills in this movie. I was expecting one of the kills to be very similar to Jason Goes to Hell, where he dumps the waitress's head in the fryer grease or whatever, because of the way they were kind of playing it out in the bar. I don't believe that happened, though, which would have been cool, but at the same time, it would have been a callback to another horror movie, which Scream is notorious for. With that being said, there is so very little character development. You don't really have a chance to care about any of the characters in the movie other than Sydney, other than Gail. The opening scene, or not the opening scene, but the introduction to Sydney's daughter is similar to how we're introduced to Sydney in the first film. Her boyfriend comes in through her window, and then they're getting kind of hot and heavy, and Sydney knocks on the bedroom door, and the boyfriend rolls off and behind the bed. Sydney comes in. She's been through this before, so she knows he's hiding next to the bed, and she calls him out on it, and so that is a pretty funny callback. And she walks him out of the house and everything. And her whole thing is she doesn't trust him because, you can't trust the boyfriend. She lived that experience. McKenna Grace's character, you have no opportunity whatsoever to actually develop any kind of an interest in her. Similar with the other characters. And you think it's going to be a character that wears a flannel shirt, as in line with the other movies. Is not, at least, I don't recall if the main killer wore a flannel shirt or not. I've only seen it once, so. But there are all these little clues, red herrings, and everything that your fans of the franchise are going to be on the lookout for. The death in the bar, one of the deaths in the bar, is a very creative kill that I haven't seen done on in slasher movies yet. It was probably my favorite kill. I actually laughed out loud during this scene, in the aftermath of it, because Ghostface puts a guy on tap, essentially, and beer and blood starts pouring out of his mouth, just like a keg, essentially. That was a pretty funny, pretty cool death scene that I hadn't seen in movies yet. But the reveal of the Ghostface killers, it didn't make sense to me. It made absolutely no sense at all. I did like the revelation that Sydney has a panic room in her house. That made a lot of sense, given everything she's experienced, and the fact that her daughter didn't know about the panic room was a little weird. You would think living in a house, you would know, things about it, but the fact that her daughter didn't know about the panic room was very weird. Ultimately, like I said, the reveals made absolutely zero sense. It was confusing. It ended up having to do with mental health in a way that hasn't been approached in the Scream franchise before, which was an interesting take. But at the same time, the killers in the previous movies, they made sense. This one, or these two, didn't. And it left me at the end of the film, we didn't even get Red Right Hand until probably halfway, if not 3/4 of the way through the film. Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds has become the unofficial Scream theme song. And we don't even get it until halfway to 3/4 of the way through the film. And then, like I said, the reveal made no sense. It was disappointing. The lack of character development was disappointing. At least in all the other movies, you care about the characters. You get to know the characters a little bit. In this film, you don't really. You don't even really get to know Sydney's daughter all that well. She's just this average teenage girl who's got a chip on her shoulder and against her mom because she's often being compared to her mom. She doesn't like the fact that her mom won't tell her anything about her past, even though her past is in the movies and in the books and everything. And she wrote a book about it and all this. It didn't make sense. I think the creators were just trying to rush this film out. I think they should have done a couple more passes of the script. By far the worst Scream movie in the history of the Scream franchise. With that being said, I do want to talk a little bit more about the final kill, the end of Ghostface in this movie. So again, spoilers. If you haven't tuned off yet, I gave you plenty of warning. It's your own damn fault if you continue watching. But as I said, there are some callbacks to Halloween H2O. In H2O, Laurie Strode takes an axe and chops who she believes is Michael Myers' head off. In Scream 7, Sydney and her daughter both have guns. And Ghostface comes back like Ghostface usually does. And they both turn around and blow Ghostface's head off. They just fire on over and over and over. And all that's left is a crater where this character's face was. And that was a pretty awesome kill. And like I said, it's kind of a callback to Halloween H2O, kind of its own thing. They don't remove her head completely, but all that's really left is a stump, essentially, that's probably no thicker than a sheet of cardboard paper. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, I would definitely recommend waiting until this comes out on streaming. And even then, you might even want to wait until it's free to watch on streaming. I'm a huge Scream fan. I've been following the franchise since the very beginning. It's one of my favorite franchises to watch during the Halloween season because it just gives you that Halloween feel. And while, yeah, it did have those fall vibes with leaves and everything blowing around. Oh, and something I forgot. Another callback to Halloween H2O was where H2O takes place in an empty boarding school, essentially, basically a town in and of itself. Scream 7, most of the final act takes place in an empty town because there is a city curfew, and that plays a big part into it. So moving from building to building, street level, nobody's able to help because there's a curfew, and yeah, you're running through the streets away from Ghostface and all that. So that was kind of a callback to Halloween H2O as well. One final thing I want to add, it's Rex Manning Day. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to check out one of these 2 playlists for more videos just like the one you just watched. I've been Shannon. This has been Comic-Getting TV, the only place on YouTube where all geek culture collides. Take care, geeks.